Brian Selter is with us now, along with attorney Nancy Ericka Smith, who represented former Fox News host Gretchen Carlson. Brian, as we look at all this, which you summed up very well where we stand, but there are also new accusations. Just walk us through really quickly what those are.
The most chilling accusation from the New York Times is the woman who says in 2001 she was summoned to Lauer's office and then he proceeded to have sex with her. At some point, she passed out, needed the help of a nurse afterwards. Now, she did not report this to NBC at the time. She felt ashamed and she didn't think anyone would believe her. So now that Lauer has been fired, she has spoken to NBC. She has filed a complaint. So have at least two other women. And the great X factor here is whether we're going to see more allegations in the coming days. We do know there is ongoing reporting. Even though Lauer has been fired, there is ongoing reporting into this. Because after all, he was there at NBC for more than 2 decades. Many, hundreds of people interacted with him there.
In its statement yesterday, in Andy Lack's email, he said, under current management, which I think this wording was very important in that memo, that under current management, they didn't know of any other issues, Nancy. Look, Andy Lack has been in power there for, it'll be 3 years in March, I believe.
Right.
And he came in, I mean, just in the last probably 5 years, there have been 3 different management teams, at least at NBC.
Right.
Matt Lauer, to your point, has been there for over 2 decades. What does that really say, Nancy?
That's no excuse whatsoever. I mean, this shows that women weren't safe. They didn't feel safe to tell the story. And the fact that current management may not have known what was going on doesn't affect how the institution made women feel that they couldn't come forward and complain. They're admitting that. You can't have little silos and say, well, she didn't tell this person. There's an institutional memory everywhere. They know what the ratings were 10 years ago. They knew who worked there. And they should have known what was going on. If they didn't, it's their fault.
To your point about the ratings, we look at Matt Lauer. Look, Matt was the Today Show.
Yes.
And a lot of the reporting that we've seen, too, talked about that Matt was in many ways untouchable, that Matt had an incredible amount of power, not just editorially on the Today Show, but within NBC News as a whole. How much more are you learning about that, Brian?
And partly this is reflective of popular culture as a whole. It's the same reason why big-budget movie stars get paid tens of millions of dollars. Matt Lauer was both a journalist, but also that kind of A-list personality. It was a big reason why millions of people tuned in. And the ratings race for these shows can affect hundreds of millions of dollars of ad revenue. So the fact that Today's Show has been winning in the key demographic for the past 2 years, beating ABC's Good Morning America, it's impossible to say that's not a factor that executives think about. Certainly they think about that. Lauer's deal was going to be up a year from now. NBC would have probably tried to get him to stay a little longer, keep going while the show was #1. Because he was the kind of ratings gold for NBC, that has to be a factor in these issues.
Well, I think that's an important point because when we ask a jury to give us punitive damages in a sexual harassment case, one of the factors that the jury can consider is whether the sexual harasser was profitable for the employer, whether they were really making money at the expense of keeping women safe. So for all the employers out there that think, wow, they make us a lot of money, you might be giving that money back to one of the victims.
It is... It just leaves you speechless for a minute to hear it laid out, you know, so pointedly. You know, we had a crew out at the Today Show this morning talking to people there on the plaza, people devastated. Take a listen to what one person had to say.
It's unbelievable, really, that so many people in such positions of authority have been accused, perhaps even involved in sexual inappropriate behavior.
She's saying it's unbelievable. I have to say, at this point in time, it's sadly no longer unbelievable to me.
I saw another fan out on the plaza who said, I was surprised, but I was not surprised.
Right.
I think that kind of sums it up, that there is this sense in these power centers in New York and LA and Washington. We've seen so many stories, and we've seen a new one today involving Russell Simmons, of these allegations affecting power, allegations against powerful men because of these women who have been victims over the years.
Go ahead.
Well, those of us who are concerned about sexual harassment saw the signs. I mean, now all these clips are online, but Matt Lauer was given probably the longest skit I've ever seen on the Today Show making fun of sexual harassment claims. That was only 5 years ago. And when you look at his treatment of women, including the Hillary Clinton interview, how he treated her versus others, there were plenty of signs that there were problems with him and women.
I don't mean it's an excuse, but I think, too, we're all looking at things through a different lens. We're looking back on interactions that perhaps we've had personally, or other people are now speaking about interactions they had, which they realize now in this lens where we're all at, were not okay. So
Lauer's been
even to
described
that
as a
credit,
consummate professional,
he was,
as
look,
an
I will say,
all-around good guy.
I worked with Matt for nearly
Just
4
point that
years,
out,
and
yeah.
he was never anything but professional with me. Was a great champion for me at some times, you know. And so in full disclosure,
People
there
are complex, and they can also have a dark side. And I think we're seeing that in a way in the last 2 months that we didn't see before.
No, and that's what we're hearing about. That's the conflict we're hearing from people like Savannah Guthrie and Gayle King. Obviously, networks, though, are starting to also see this through a new lens. They're addressing it quickly, but Nancy, is anything actually changing, do you think, across the board?
I think things are changing, and they're going to change more if we do a couple things. One, if we outlaw non-disclosure agreements so that serial harassers can't hide their many, many victims. And New Jersey and California are both trying to do that. Two, next week in Congress, a bipartisan bill sponsored by 2 women in the Senate and 2 women in the Congress are holding a press conference with Gretchen Carlson banning forced arbitration for sexual harassment claims, so we don't go to secret corporate courts. Those 2 things are really going to change things. And journalism. Journalism has brought this out into the open, and women feel safer when there are other women coming forward and they're speaking out. We've had it, and I think that really things are changing. Those things are going to change everything. New ball game.
All right, we'll be watching, and sadly, we'll probably be reporting on someone else very shortly. Brian, Nancy, appreciate both of you joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.